Hey guys, I am sorry it's a little bit delayed in me bringing you this update. I know I left a couple of tweezers out there on the community tab, and if you follow me on Instagram you might already know what I'm about to show you, but I set myself a task at the beginning of the week. I took some annual leave and I'm happy to share that I delivered on my goal and I moved my shed. So I took a week off work and I spent every day up here. So when I started out, I actually started digging a French drain. So I did that so that I could access the space before I actually moved the shed, and I was able to get in and start that process. Now it's not completely finished, but at least I've made a little bit of a start on that project. I filled up my wheelbarrow with the clay from the French drain and offloaded it at the front of the plot. At the minute, the starting depth of the French drain is around 9.5 inches. It's definitely going to take me a couple more weeks to finish all of this digging. I did have two very cheeky neighbours drop by for a visit whilst I was digging away, and they perched themselves just outside the gate waiting for the opportune moment to enter the plot. I used around 11 wheelbarrows of clay to backfill this area of the plot. I tried to make everything as level as possible, and I spent a good 20 minutes measuring up and raking everything before pressing it all into place and squishing down the clay with my feet to firm up the base. The following day I decided to tackle the side of the shed that houses the chicken coop. I'm pretty much a master with chicken wire at this stage in my allotment journey, and it was relatively easy to take the front section of the coop apart. All I needed was to use a screwdriver, a hammer and a little bit of strength to dismantle the majority of it. I started off with removing the door before moving on to the trim and any other bits of wood that were easy for me to access. This area of the plot is covered in nettles. Some were even as tall as my waist, and it's fair to say I received hundreds of stings from them. Before I went ahead and attempted to remove the roof completely, I wanted to show you what the inside of the front of the chicken coop looks like. It's pretty much made up of metal wire and a lot of rubble. We were able to separate the walls from the main shed's structure, and I was able to peer inside, and it was revealed to me why the back of the shed had such a bad water ingress problem. The rear of the shed is under a good foot of rubble and mud, and the walls were practically buried. So all of this here needs to be dug out. The next day I treated myself to a little lay-in, so I headed up to the plot a little bit later and arrived around 12 o'clock. I headed to a quiet spot on the allotment site for lunch before starting work on the plot. On the menu today was a chicken and stuffing roll, a lemon iced tea and a packet of Quavers, which you might tell from the smile on my face I haven't had in years, and I was feeling very pleased with my selection. In preparation for the new shed location, I had to prep the base, which meant the existing fencing needed to be dismantled. Everything was being held in very snugly by nettle roots, which meant a lot more digging for me. Once the wire fence was out of the way, I was able to wiggle the fence posts back and forth to loosen the soil around them, enabling me to lift them out. The front of the plot wasn't as level as I had hoped. I had spent a little bit more time burrowing soil to re-level the surface. Only this time I decided to take soil from underneath the former chicken coop. I figured this soil was mostly dry and it was fairly loose and would be a little bit easier on my muscles than continuing with the wet clay from the French drain. With the area clear and no boundary in the way, I was able to move the flagstones into place. I had just enough to cover the base of the shed with one flagstone spare, which I will use for the entrance to the shed. With the new base area prepped, it was time to press on with dismantling the rest of the shed. We started at the top, removing the roof before dismantling each panel one by one. Sadly, as we dismantled the roof, the felt did actually get damaged and it ripped in half. With the heaviest parts of the shed out of the way, I went ahead and tried to move the shed base. I was mostly interested to see the status of the wood in the back corner on the right hand side, as this area had suffered the brunt of the leaks, and I had no idea how long this shed had actually been leaking before I took on the plot. The base in general was fairly light, so I decided to give it a go and lift it on my own. I instantly regretted trying to move this piece, because what lurked underneath wasn't a pretty sight, so I decided that was enough for the day and I headed home. We were at day 4 and it is the final day of the big move. It was 22 degrees and by far the hottest day of the week, with not a single cloud in the sky. and it was time to rebuild the shed. Thankfully, it was a still day and the wind wasn't that strong. The trickiest part was getting the first corner completed, so I popped in a few struts of wood to stabilise the panels as everything was being assembled. It took just over 1.5 hours to rebuild everything. I'm going to bring you in now and show you everything a little bit closer. So as you then come down to the plot, it looks like this now instead. So I do obviously need to go in and paint the back of the shed, but I think it looks so much better. So I'm going to show you my little French drain a little bit closer up. I do have plans at the very back of the shed to build up a little flower bed and to put in some spring bulbs all the way like across there. I think that looks so nice. I need to get a little bit trim just to finish off the very bottom of the shed, because I did snap a piece when I moved it, so that one board just needs to be protected there a little bit, which is super cool. I found a tin of the red paint, which is the same colour, so I'm super happy with that, so I can just crack on and give that a good old paint. And this is what it looks like from the other side. I had a load of people down yesterday, obviously plot neighbours, popping in and chatting away to me, and yeah, one of them said to me that he'll do me a gate. He said his rates are very expensive, but he'll do the first one for free. But I actually need two, so I am hoping that was a joke. As you can see here, I've left a good amount of space. I'd say maybe 3 foot roughly from where the French drain starts, and the idea here is to have a gate that opens and closes. I'm not sure what side yet, maybe the front closest to us here, and then I'm going to plant this year some sunflowers across this area here. And then what I'll do then in future is I'll plant some climbers, so maybe like some clematis or a nice climbing rose, and then the whole shed will be covered tip to toe in flowers, which is lovely. And then you may notice in the background is the trailer, because I was told that the guy still wants his trailer, so I tucked in as much as I could and gave it a cover over. And then just behind the trailer is the chicken coop. So I thought the wood was obviously still good, so I've kept that. And a guy that has just started his plot down this way, he's only had the plot literally a week, said he'd take it and he can start up his plot with a shed, because he has no structures at all. So I feel really happy that I'm able to help and gift something on to somebody and yeah, give them a little head start on their new plot. So I'm going to head in now and I'm going to show you one of the main reasons why I'm super happy with the way the plot is at the minute. I had to actually fill up all of this space. I've got a couple more barrow loads that I need to do just to obviously level the surface that was here, because I haven't finished doing that yet. I only did what was needed for the shed itself. So as you come into the shed, the whole idea of this is I get to see my plot through the shed, which is amazing. So it means I can pot on, I can do whatever I'm doing here, and I get to look out onto my plot and how the progress is going. You might remember before that the shed windows were actually facing my neighbour's polytunnel. So now instead of facing her lovely polytunnel, it's now facing my lovely plot. So that was obviously one of the main reasons why I've moved it. Secondly is the area that I'm under at the minute is all hardcore. So it used to be a car parking space for the previous tenant. So what that means is obviously he backfilled it all with big chunks of rubble, and I just thought, oh, I don't have the energy to sieve all that. It's going to be really difficult to grow in. And I was never 100% happy with where the shed was anyway. So this was only going to originally be 1 bed space, which this is now taking up. So the shed in total did measure it. It's 6 foot by 10 foot. So in meters, I think it's roughly 1.8 meters by, I think is it 3.2 meters roughly on the conversion. So that's how much this space is. And that only takes up 1 bed. And it means then the space at the front of the plot where it was, I've obviously halved the footprint of the shed by taking the chicken coop off, and it's opened up the space at the back, and I think I will be able to get about 3 beds in there plus a polytunnel. So that is the second reason. So obviously more space, and whatever space I have I want to maximise it, and just having that in the middle at the back was just a complete waste of space. And I just obviously don't have the time to look after chickens, which is why I obviously decided to then collapse the chicken side of things. As much as they were lovely and I very much enjoyed chasing them around my plot to make sure they didn't eat anything, I just don't have the time at the moment for them. Maybe in years to come I would love to, but at the minute if I did have them they'd be at home, but I don't have space for them at home, so I can obviously let them out in and out during the day and stuff and tend to them as they need. And obviously I don't want to make Rue jealous either. So there is one more reason why I decided to move the shed down here. There is a big massive tree above the shed here, and that creates shade about halfway up the plot. So I think it comes to about here is where the trees are shaded. So what it means is the shed can actually be in a shady spot. I've popped my little chair there, and it means I can actually get some cover from the heat of like the peak of the afternoon, and it's been perfect. I was always like thinking like, oh, I was going to go down the side of where the shed was originally outside the windows, thinking that would be a shady spot, but like I'll be able to sit and look at my garden rather than like round the back of the shed, hemmed into a really small couple of feet space. So I feel like for the enjoyment of my plot, I'm able to sit in the shade, get some cover from the afternoon heat, and not like exhaust myself when I'm up here. I'm able to then have multiple spots where I'm able to look and appreciate everything that I've done so far. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks a total mess down this end of the plot. This is obviously cardboard and everything like that for when I was going to put the brassica bed in here, but I haven't got around to that yet. But it's a marathon, not a sprint, so I will get there. But this, just a little bit of context, I suppose, why I did it. And I was checking the weather, and I kind of thought to myself, the week was beautiful that was in it. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take the week. I know I should be probably planting out my vegetables, but like, when would I ever get a full week guaranteed of no rain to be able to move this? And the rain is actually coming. We're forecasted for a whole wet week. I actually have some tarp to go over the top of this that I need to put on this evening before I head home, because unfortunately when I did take the roof down, some of the tarpaulin had split, like it wasn't tacked in properly, so it completely split in half and broke. So whilst I save up for some new tarpaulin, new felt, I have got tarpaulin to go over that to keep it watertight, because we have one full wet week coming, and we will also have a blight warning until Tuesday. Well, so it's Sunday today that I'm filming this, and I have a blight warning for the next 48 hours, which makes me very sad. So I hope these pull through and nothing bad happens. And there you have it, my new shed. I actually think it looks really nice. Once I get the gates sorted and I've got some beautiful climbers, that is just going to be the most beautiful backdrop when I'm looking up the plot, and also the opposite end when I'm in the shed or just outside it looking down the plot. And it was so good to meet my plot neighbours when they did come over yesterday. And although I didn't actually get anything done filming wise or planting, I obviously met one of them that said they was going to make my gate, and I also was taken on a little trip around the site, which was really cool. And there's various deposit sites up kind of the top area, and that's kind of where, like, if you've got something but you don't have a use for it but somebody else might, there's little like deposit spots up there. And he said to me when he was like looking at the shed and said, look, you've done a really good job, you should get some guttering. I said, yeah, I've actually in the process of pricing up the guttering. And he said, no, come with me. So we did like a little kind of walk around the site, and look what he found me. So he found me some guttering, which is absolutely massive. Like, it's definitely large enough for the shed itself, and it's also got a little downpipe in there as well. So I've got a downpipe, I've got some guttering, so all I need is some brackets. So yeah, a wicked week that I had up here. I just had the very best time. So whilst my last couple of days down here this week weren't the most productive, I did go and have a little nose round a couple of people's plots. They invited me in. I was gifted eggs, lettuce, scallions or spring onions, and yeah, obviously got some guttering, and everyone just said, like, you did an amazing job, and whatever I grow this year is a bonus, and next year I'll be away with it. So super happy. And here is my extra grow space. So from about here is where I'll start the beds, all that I put in here eventually, I'm hoping. So from this point all the way back is about 14 feet of extra space, which I'm really happy about. And I reckon I can put in at least 3 beds, like one in the middle and then 2 either side. So at the moment it's looking a little bit worse for wear. Under the tarpaulin and rotting chipboard is just some wood that I'm trying to keep dry. It's not, I can't use it for anything because it was all dug up from being on the floor and buried into the mud, and you would have remembered it was snapping as I was trying to lift it up because it was just starting to rot. So it's full of worms and all that kind of stuff. So I need to get rid of that at some point, but I'm just keeping it dry because it's a little bit easier to lift it when it is dry. And my barrel here in the middle, as I had a couple of little kind of fires going over the week that I was up here, and under this tarpaulin that's here is a couple of skeletons, and it just doesn't look too nice. So I just popped that there, and I don't really know what to do with the skeletons or where to put them. So I've just left that there so I don't have to keep looking at them or step in them or anything like that. So, and then across the back here is my felt that broke, but it's working as a perfect weed suppressant at the minute, so I've just popped it down there. And yeah, all in all, super happy with this extra space. And then obviously when I've saved up enough pennies, I can obviously then get a polytunnel put in. And like that I was saying earlier about where the shade kind of comes halfway up the plot in the evening time, from about 4 o'clock onwards we start to get the shade. This part here actually doesn't get any shade at all, so it's the perfect spot for the polytunnel to go in. So I'm absolutely thrilled. I love it. And I know it doesn't look that great behind me, but I did say it was going to get a lot worse before it's going to start looking better. So whilst it is looking a little bit rough around the edges, the plan is in motion for everything to like start taking shape, and it really feels like my plot now. So I'm really chuffed. I'm absolutely exhausted. Obviously I did have the help, like I said, but I'm absolutely exhausted. I could need another week off after moving that, but I'm really thrilled. It was so worth the hard work, and just like feel accomplished that I've done it, and I absolutely love it. But let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you next week. Bye. Guys, look, I've moved my shed.